My 37th birthday just came and went without much fanfare, which is exactly what I wanted. I'm not a big birthday person and I never have been, but I will admit that this birthday hit me harder than I expected, and I think that was for a few reasons. So that's what I want to talk about today. And I think one of the reasons it hit me hard the day of and in the days leading up to it is because it was the first birthday in recent memory, or in my memory at all, actually, that I spent my birthday alone. And that kind of hit me hard. Even as someone who's not a big birthday person, I've always had family or a partner or friends around me on the day of. And so it just felt a little lonely and sad leading up to it. And so I kind of had mixed feelings about it, and I ended up having a great day, but I just did feel some type of way about it. And initially I did have plans on my birthday and they fell through for very good reasons. So that's not what I felt some type of way about. That was completely fine. It was more just my own feelings about it. And I probably could have scrambled and come up with alternative plans or done something else, but I didn't really want to, and so I ended up just spending the day by myself. But I think the bigger reason why this birthday hit me a little harder, despite the fact that it's not a milestone birthday, it's 37 is not really a birthday of note. But I think the reason why it hit me a little bit harder is because it just really made me reflect on my life and how things look right now. And specifically, I was reflecting a lot on the fact that my life looks nothing like I thought it would look a couple years ago. And my life doesn't look anything like what it did on my 34th or 35th birthday. So a lot has changed in these last couple years. A lot of that has been my choices and decisions. Some of it hasn't, but at the end of the day, it still just felt like an overwhelming amount of change. The last couple years have really felt like 2 years of starting over. 2 years of having to tear everything down and build everything back up again from scratch. I'm living in a different apartment than I was. I'm living in a different city than I was, in a different country than I was a couple years ago. I've lost friendships and relationships in the last couple years. I've made new friendships and established new connections with people, or rekindled old friendships with people. I have not just a new job, but a new career entirely than what I was doing a couple years ago. So in pretty much just every way that you could imagine, my life has changed. And not even just in those, I don't want to call them surface level ways, because those are pretty significant changes I just listed, but even internally, just with my own vision of my life, my own wants and desires. For instance, thinking about marriage and children, and those are things that I have changed my mind about a lot in the last couple years. So it's really been a reckoning of sorts, and I think that's why this birthday was just hitting me, because it was really clicking. I was like, okay, you're 37. And then I was like, wow, your life is completely different in every possible way than it was a couple years ago. And 34, 35-year-old me probably never would have called it, would have never seen this coming. So it's just a little disorienting, and it feels scary. Like, I don't even know why exactly. It just feels a bit scary and unsettling. And so that's why I wanted to talk about it today, and just talk about this idea of like starting over in your mid to late 30s, starting over at this really pivotal time in your life. I think it's painful to start over like at any time. Don't get me wrong. Like, I've done this before in my 20s and picked up and left all my friends and a relationship behind and moved to a different continent. So I've definitely been there before, but I think this change and life transition these last couple of years has just felt different, not harder, just different, because being in your mid to late 30s is such a pivotal time for making those decisions about partnership. And if you are interested in finding a life partner, if you are interested in having children, these are prime career years. So there's just a lot, I think, happening in life in your mid to late 30s into your early 40s. You might have aging or sick parents. You might be caregiving for young children of your own. You're starting to enter into that sandwich generation. And I feel like adulthood is just very surreal in that way in general, where you look back at the life you were living 2 years ago sometimes, and it almost feels like a totally different person was the person living through those days. And in a lot of ways, it was a totally different person that might not even be recognizable to you anymore. So it's just very strange and can feel kind of out of body sometimes. But yeah, it really has been an overwhelming amount of change in these last couple of years. And I think for the first year after I got back to Toronto, and context for those who are maybe finding me for the first time, I lived in New York for a number of years, and I just moved back to my hometown a couple years ago. And I think my first year of being home, I was just reeling. I was just exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally drained. I didn't have it in me to do much of anything other than just work and sleep. And I think I really needed this season of life to just recuperate because everything had changed so quickly. And there had been a lot of loss in that time. And so I think my first year back in Toronto, I was just trying to get my bearings again, and face the fact that I was starting over, because that's not something you just wrap your head around in a day, where you're like, oh good, everything's oh good, that relationship is over and I no longer live in New York and now I'm doing this totally different career and have an entirely different life plan. That's not something you just wrap your head around in a week or two. That's many months of grieving and processing, and it comes in waves. There were times when I thought I was really adjusting well to my new life back in Toronto, and then all of a sudden, grief would hit me like a wave again, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm not quite over that yet. That's unfortunate. I thought we had dealt with that and moved on, but I guess not. So it's really just been a strange couple years in that way. And I know it's kind of cliche to say, but the last 2 years and starting over and rebuilding my life kind of from scratch has kind of been a gift. It's been a really rough road, not gonna lie. A lot of tears, a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, and a lot of picking up the pieces the last couple years. But just to say, it really is true that when you start to come out on the other side of it, wow, things are so much better. And things are so much better than they were when I was 34 or 35, even though I couldn't always see that in the moment, even though I couldn't always see that over the last 2 years, there were a lot of moments where I was mourning and grieving and wishing for my old life. There were many days where I wished I had never had to leave New York, because that ended up being not under, let's say, the most ideal of circumstances. There was a lot happening there with just immigration, and so it wasn't exactly on my terms that I departed. And so dealing with the aftermath and being home and being back in my hometown and it feeling very weird to be back in my hometown, I missed New York so deeply. So for sure, there was a lot of that, a lot of pain and grief, and a lot of questioning decisions. And it's so easy to say on the other side of it, hey, it'll be worth it. And that might just feel like an empty platitude, so I don't even really want to say it. But I think just if you're still really in the throes of it, knowing that yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but also all of those things that you're feeling also just mean that you are still alive, you are still here, you still care. And in some ways, the last 2 years were also actually, as terrible as they were and as painful as they were, it was preferred to me versus versions of myself that I had previously seen where I was very numb, where I was very disassociated, where I was not willing to face up to what was going on in my life. And the last 2 years, as rough as they've been, at least I felt alive. At least I was awake enough in my own life to feel pain, to feel grief, and to start to pick up the pieces and figure out what my new life was going to look like. Because I hadn't always felt that way. I had gone through stretches of being like really detached. And while it is still really strange to me, and I don't know if it will ever not be strange, that there, was once a person, or there were once people in your life who knew every mundane detail about you, who you told every little thing to about your day. And now you no longer even speak to them. I don't think that will ever become normal to me all of a sudden, but that is life. People die, people break up. And I think the thing that has just become clearer to me the older I get is that life does just go on even when horrible things happen to you. It's very weird because the rest of the world just keeps on spinning and you feel very stuck and frozen, and sometimes you feel like you're trapped in a dream and everyone else is just sort of going about their business around you. And life does just have a way of marching forward. And a really sad reckoning is that you are not always going to have the people around you that you may want. And I think the only guarantee in this life, other than death and taxes, is that you are the person that you will spend the rest of your life with. So you really have to be and deserve to be the foundation of your own life. You are the sun. And I think that's something that I've really only realized in the last couple years as someone who was very focused and centered on my vision of my life, which largely revolved around partnership and motherhood. I've really had a huge reckoning with that as well, where I really want myself to be the focus of my own life. And I don't really know exactly what my life is going to look like. The fact of the matter is I might just be starting over again in 2 years or 5 years or 20 years. Like, that's the thing. None of us really know. So you kind of just have to start getting comfortable with the fact that a lot of this is not really in our control, and you just kind of have to be able to roll with it. And regardless of what happens, know that you will be okay. Like, know that you always have the ability, if anything happens to you, to pick up the pieces, and that you will be okay one day, even if it doesn't feel that way at all right now, regardless of any breakup or any loss or any friendship breakup or anything that happens, that you are still there and you can pick up the pieces and you can start over. And I think something that I just didn't really appreciate when I was younger, or I was unable to appreciate when I was younger, is that starting over even though it's so messy and painful, is really a gift. Like, it can open doors for you that you never thought possible. You might become a person that you never anticipated. And that new person might be the kind of person who knows their worth, who gets sober, who, you know, makes really powerful decisions for themselves and their life. So as much as sometimes you're just like, what the fuck? Like, everything is falling apart. Like, everything is falling apart at once. Sometimes that can be a really good thing. And I know that's hard to see that in the moment. Trust me, I know. But sometimes you gotta trust the process and know that there can be really great things on the other side of that. Because if you had told me 2 years ago what my life looked like now, I probably would have been a little sad about it. And now, here, right now at 37, all I feel is gratitude and excitement and relief, a huge amount of relief that some of those other things didn't work out. And I'm not I'm not a religious person. I'm not a particularly spiritual person. But my God, do things really have a way of working themselves out sometimes where, like, relationships end for a reason. And you just gotta trust in that sometimes. And sometimes you're not meant to live in certain places. You know, like, things just do have a way of working themselves out. And so even though this birthday hit me really hard at first, it's actually been the best few weeks of just realizing how happy I am in my new life, as rocky as the last couple years have been, and as hard as it is to start over. In your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s, 60s, and beyond, it's always hard. But as difficult as it's been, that I am looking at my life right now and I'm so happy with it. And that has been an amazing feeling. So even though the lead up and the day of was a little rough, I feel really lucky to have landed in the place I am now. And I look ahead with a lot of excitement and joy.